If you're gonna lay a hand on her, you'll have to go through every damn woman who's ever been overlooked.
You touch her again, and I swear I'll make you regret it. That voice didn't come from a cop. It didn't come from a bodyguard or some trained fighter. It came from Chloe McKinley, a 22-year-old black waitress standing barefoot in the rain with a cracked bottle still spinning near her feet. Just minutes before, 3 men had shoved a woman into the brick wall of a back alley behind a steakhouse in Brooklyn. She was short, calm, and clearly terrified. They didn't care who she was. They didn't ask. They only saw her skin yellow and assumed the worst. Slurs flew like spit. Go back to your country. You people don't belong here. Spy bitch. They didn't know she was Aiko Sakamoto, a billionaire tech CEO from Japan. They didn't know the night was about to turn. They didn't see Chloe coming, but Chloe saw them. She'd been taking out the trash from the kitchen. She'd heard the yelling, and something in her snapped. Not from fear, but from recognition. She knew that tone, that laugh, that sick, sneering dominance. She'd lived it. She'd served it table after table, and she was done being silent. One bottle, one throw, straight to the face of the ringleader. Blood, confusion. Then her voice cut the air. You touch her again, and I swear I'll make you regret it. That throw didn't just save a life. It started a chain reaction that would change 2 women forever. This isn't just another hero moment. This is a black story, a real one. And the kind of story we tell here on Hidden Worth, where people like Chloe don't just survive, they rise. If this moment grabs you like it grabbed me the first time I heard it, you're gonna want to see what happens next. Because the throw was just the beginning. Let's go back. Before the alley. Before the glass. Before 2 worlds collided in the shadows of Brooklyn. Let's meet Chloe, and let's find out why she was always meant to be more than a waitress. Her name is Chloe McKinley. She's 22. Works 6 days a week at a steakhouse off Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. Lives in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat that smells like soap and old socks. She doesn't complain. She can't afford to. Chloe is the kind of person who remembers your coffee order by the second visit, who keeps extra mints in her apron for little kids, who stays late when coworkers bail. She shows up early, hair tied back, black button-down crisp, smile in place. That smile, it's her shield. A soft light in a world that doesn't always feel kind. But behind that smile is a history too heavy for someone her age. Chloe was raised by her grandmother in a small town outside Savannah, Georgia. Her mom passed when she was 7. Her dad never around. Grandma Pearl taught her to stand tall, speak clearly, and never let the world tell her who she was. But even standing tall, Chloe learned early how the world could shrink you down. In high school, she was called too loud, too sensitive, too confident. One teacher told her college might not be a good fit. Another said she had attitude. When she spoke up, she was labeled angry. When she stayed quiet, she was ignored. She was accepted to an art institute in Chicago but couldn't afford to go. So she moved to Brooklyn. She figured, if she had to fight, she'd fight in a city that never stopped moving. At the steakhouse, she hears it all. You people are such hard workers. Where are you really from? Do you all braid your hair like that? Sometimes the comments come with fake laughs. Sometimes with a $20 tip to make it feel okay. But it never does. She doesn't argue. She needs the job. The tips keep the lights on. Half her paycheck goes to her grandma. The rest? Rent, groceries, and a worn envelope labeled studio fund, tucked under her mattress with exactly $247.75 inside. Chloe paints on Sundays. Her art is bold, colorful, unapologetically black. Her walls are covered in faces, strong women with eyes like hers, full of fire. She's not looking for fame. She just wants to feel seen, to be treated like she matters. So that night in the alley, when she saw a woman being shoved, insulted, humiliated, Chloe didn't think. She just moved. Because when you spend your whole life being stepped over, there comes a moment when you decide no more. And for Chloe, that moment came with a bottle in her hand and a fire in her soul. Her name is Aiko Sakamoto, 40 years old, born in Osaka, educated in Tokyo, fluent in 4 languages, holds 2 PhDs, one in computer engineering, one in behavioral economics. She's the founder and CEO of Neuron Spark, one of the fastest growing AI companies in the world. And yet, In every boardroom in America, she still gets asked if she's the translator. Aiko moved to the US 3 years ago, not for comfort, but for challenge. She wanted to expand her company into the American market, not just for profit, but because she believed her work could change lives. AI tools that help children with disabilities, algorithms that reduce medical bias, software that democratizes access to mental health care. But she quickly learned that being brilliant isn't always enough. At investor meetings, men twice her age called her sweetheart. At pitch events, they asked if she really understood the tech or if someone else built it for her. In interviews, reporters focused on her grace and demeanor before they ever mentioned her work. And then there were the whispers. Behind closed doors, too cold, too serious, too foreign. Some assumed she was Chinese. Others thought she couldn't possibly lead a billion-dollar company without help from Western partners. None of it was new to her. In Japan, she was already an outlier. A woman in tech, a boss, a billionaire before 40. But here, the discrimination wore a different face, polite smiles hiding sharp knives. Still, Aiko kept going, not for approval, but for purpose. Her schedule was brutal. Red eyes between coasts, 12-hour days, meetings in suits that fit too tight and rooms that felt colder the more she spoke. She missed birthdays. She skipped vacations. Her personal life? Non-existent. But none of it bothered her as much as the loneliness. Not being alone, but being the only Asian woman at the table, the only immigrant, the only one who couldn't afford to slip not even once. So when those men shoved her into that alley, yelling things they wouldn't dare say in daylight, it wasn't the first time she'd heard them. But it was the first time someone had stepped in before she had to fight back alone. That someone was Chloe. And in that moment, Aiko didn't see a waitress. She saw a warrior. The next morning, Chloe was back at work like nothing had happened. She didn't expect a thank you, definitely not from the woman she'd saved. Honestly, she wasn't even sure the woman remembered her face. The alley was dark. It all happened so fast. And Chloe wasn't the kind of person who did things to be noticed. She just acted. So when a black Tesla pulled up outside the steakhouse at 10 a.m., before doors even opened, she figured it was just another delivery. Until a woman in a slate gray coat stepped out. Aiko. Elegant, composed, the kind of calm that doesn't rattle, even after a night like that. She walked in and looked around like she didn't belong in a place with sticky menus and flickering lights. But then her eyes landed on Chloe, dressed in black slacks and a coffee-stained apron, and she smiled. "Miss McKinley?" she asked gently, with an accent that wrapped around every syllable like silk. Chloe blinked. "Yeah? I wanted to thank you, properly, for what you did." Chloe shrugged. Did what anybody would have done. Aiko tilted her head. "I'm not so sure about that." She offered to take Chloe to lunch, somewhere quiet. Chloe almost said no, she still had hours left in her shift. But her manager, watching from the corner, mouthed the words, "Go. Just go." They sat in a cafe 2 blocks away. No cameras, no reporters, just 2 women, one sipping green tea, the other clutching an iced coffee she couldn't stop stirring. Aiko listened more than she spoke, asked Chloe about her art, her family, her plans. And then, after a long pause, she said something Chloe never saw coming. "I have a position open," Aiko said. "Temporary, assistant level, but real, paid well, travel involved. You'd learn a lot, and I'd trust you, with everything." Chloe stared at her. "You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance, because what you did last night, that wasn't small. That was leadership." Chloe didn't know what to say. Her heart beat so hard she could hear it in her ears. No one had ever offered her something like that. Not without conditions, not without wanting something in return. And yet here was Aiko, calm, steady, serious, offering her more than a job, offering her the beginning of something entirely new. The first few days were awkward. Chloe wasn't used to offices with glass walls, catered lunches, or people who used words like synergy and vertical integration in casual conversation. She wasn't used to riding in town cars or having someone hand her an itinerary for the week, and she definitely wasn't used to being referred to as Miss McKinley. But Aiko made it easier. She didn't hover or micromanage. She just trusted Chloe, gave her space to figure things out, and stepped in only when she asked. At first, Chloe thought it was some kind of test, like she was being set up to fail quietly. But as the days went by, she realized something strange. Aiko actually meant it. She meant to give Chloe a seat at the table, even if Chloe wasn't sure she belonged there yet. They were nothing alike on the surface. Aiko spoke in precise, clipped English and moved like every second mattered. Chloe was more fluid, instinctive, always reading the room before speaking. Aiko made decisions based on data. Chloe led with gut feeling. And yet, they worked. At a strategy meeting, Aiko once paused mid-sentence and asked, "Chloe, what do you think?" The room went silent. All eyes turned. Chloe's throat tightened. But she spoke, carefully, honestly. And after a beat, Aiko nodded. "Good insight," she said, and kept going. No one interrupted Chloe again after that. On the way home that night, Chloe asked why she'd been included. Aiko didn't hesitate. "Because your perspective is one I don't have," she said. "And because I trust you to tell me the truth when others won't." They began to talk more not just about work, but about everything. Family, identity. What it meant to be watched all the time, yet still feel unseen. Aiko told Chloe about the years she spent being the only woman in rooms filled with men twice her age. Chloe told Aiko what it felt like to shrink herself for the comfort of people who never really saw her. Bit by bit, they built something. Not just a working relationship, but a bridge. Between power and potential. Between experience and raw instinct. Between two women who, despite everything that made them different, saw something rare and familiar in each other. The quiet strength of someone who's had to fight harder just to stand still. For a while, things felt like a dream. Chloe was learning more in 1 week than she had in years. She was attending high-level meetings, organizing events, even helping Aiko draft public responses to industry issues. It was intense, but exciting. For the first time in her life, Chloe felt like she was in it, not just watching success from the sidelines, but participating, contributing. But then came the gala. It was a tech fundraiser at a luxury rooftop in Manhattan. Champagne towers, gold name tags, smiles that didn't always reach the eyes. Aiko, flawless in a midnight blue gown, floated from table to table like a queen in command of her court. Chloe stood near the back, in black slacks and a silk blouse Aiko had bought her. She looked good. She felt proud. Until she overheard two of Aiko's longtime advisors chatting near the bar. "Is that the girl from the alley?" one of them asked. "Yeah," the other replied with a smirk. "Aiko's little rescue project. Cute. She'll make a great assistant/accessory for a few headlines." They both laughed. Chloe stood frozen, cheeks burning. She wasn't even angry, just numb, like the wind had been knocked out of her. All this time she thought she was proving something, earning her place. But in their eyes, she was still just a moment. A bottle in the dark, a charity case dressed up in borrowed silk. She left early, didn't even say goodbye. The next morning, she didn't show up for work. She turned off her phone, stayed curled up on her couch, staring at the ceiling. Her studio fund envelope sat on the table, half open, its contents untouched. For the first time since meeting Aiko, Chloe wondered if any of this had been real or if she'd been kidding herself all along. That afternoon, there was a knock at her door. It was Aiko. No driver, no assistant, just her. Chloe opened the door, barely. "They think I saved you," Aiko said softly. "But the truth is, you saved me. Don't let people who don't matter decide your worth." Chloe didn't respond right away. Her throat was tight. But in Aiko's eyes, she saw it truth, not pity. Respect, not charity. And that, more than anything, gave her the strength to walk back in. Not for them. For herself. The story broke 3 days after the gala. It started with a headline on a tech blog. "Billionaire CEO rescued in Brooklyn alley by black waitress." Within hours, it spread like wildfire. The article focused more on the alley than on the aftermath. It framed Chloe as the unlikely hero, a young waitress from the rough side of Brooklyn who threw a bottle like a scene out of a movie. Aiko was portrayed as the brilliant but vulnerable foreign CEO. And while the tone was meant to be flattering, Chloe read every line with a knot in her stomach. There were photos, some grainy, others taken from her barely used Instagram account. People shared the story with hashtags like #UrbanHero and #FromTheStreets to the boardroom. Strangers flooded her DMs. Some praised her, others pitied her. A few asked if the story was staged. Then came the TV interviews. Chloe and Aiko were invited to appear on talk shows, news segments, podcasts. Chloe said no to almost all of them. She didn't want to be a headline. She didn't want to be a symbol. Aiko understood, but she also saw something deeper, an opportunity to change the narrative. One afternoon, she sat across from Chloe in their shared office and said, "We can't control how they tell our story unless we tell it ourselves." Chloe hesitated. She wasn't used to speaking for anyone but herself, but she agreed. They appeared on a podcast called Truth Seat, raw, unfiltered, conversations about race, power, and modern America. The host didn't sugarcoat a thing, and neither did they. Aiko spoke about being underestimated in every room she walked into. Chloe talked about how being visible in the news didn't feel the same as being seen as a person. Together, they shared not just the alley moment, but everything that led up to it, years of quiet humiliation, the constant tightrope walk of being black, Asian, female, other. By the end of the episode, the host went silent. Then he said, "This is what real power sounds like." The response was overwhelming. Thousands of messages poured in. Not just support, but stories, similar pain, similar struggles. People who'd never heard their truth reflected back to them. Until now. Chloe still didn't like the spotlight, but for the first time, she felt like it wasn't burning her. It was lighting the way forward. The Blue Phoenix Fund didn't start as a business plan. It started as a feeling. A deep, shared exhaustion with watching talented women be overlooked, unheard, underpaid, and underestimated. For Aiko, it was boardrooms filled with suits who smiled politely but dismissed her quietly. For Chloe, it was customers who called her girl instead of her name. After the podcast, they sat down not as CEO and assistant, but as women who had walked through fire and decided not to come out empty-handed. "We can't fix the whole system," Chloe said over tea one night, "but we can start somewhere." Aiko nodded. "Let's start where we were never invited, and build the table ourselves." So they did. The Blue Phoenix Fund launched with a single goal: to invest in the voices and visions of women of color. Not just scholarships, but mentorships, microgrants, training programs, and mental health resources. Because opportunity isn't just about money. It's about being believed in. The name was Chloe's idea. She had painted a phoenix years ago, rising from blue flames. It was one of the first pieces she ever hung in her apartment. When she showed Aiko, the connection was instant. "That," Aiko said, "is the name." They filmed a short announcement, just the two of them, sitting in a sunlit room with no makeup, no script. Chloe spoke first, her voice calm but firm. She shared her story, not just the bottle, but the years before it. The rejection letters, the long shifts, the quiet moments when she almost gave up on herself. Aiko followed. She spoke not as a billionaire, but as a woman who had been silenced in rooms she helped build. They didn't ask for sympathy. They asked for belief. And people responded. Within the first week, donations passed $250,000. Small checks came from single moms and students. Bigger ones came from women-led companies who said, "We've been waiting for something like this." Applications flooded in young women with dreams of becoming engineers, filmmakers, poets, doctors, each one carrying a story too heavy to tell in just one page. The Blue Phoenix Fund wasn't about saving anyone. It was about recognizing the fire that was already there and giving it room to rise. And for Chloe, it was the first time she saw her story not just echoed but multiplied. 6 months ago, Chloe was bussing tables in a steakhouse that barely knew her name. Now she was standing backstage at the National Women's Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C. Mic clipped to her collar, a sea of voices humming beyond the curtain, rows of folding chairs filled with women who had faced battles she could only imagine. And still, she was the one about to speak. The event coordinator gave her a thumbs up. "You're on in 30 seconds. Chloe's hands trembled slightly, but she took a breath. Steady, grounded. Just like Aiko taught her. Lead with truth, not performance. Her name was announced. Applause rose. Lights brightened. Chloe stepped onto the stage not in heels or some designer outfit, but in simple black slacks and a navy blouse, the same one she wore to her first meeting with Aiko. It felt right. It felt like her. She took the mic, looked out at the room, and began. I spent 4 years serving people who never asked for my name. A pause. Some days, I was Chloe. Some days I was, hey girl, or you. One guy once called me his favorite little shadow. I laughed, because that's what you do when you need to keep your shift. The room went still, not stiff listening. Chloe continued, voice calm but powerful. I wasn't a CEO. I wasn't a graduate. I wasn't someone you invite to conferences like this. But I've always had a voice. I just didn't know the world was willing to hear it. She spoke about her first paycheck, her grandma's encouragement, her hidden paintings, the moment in the alley where instinct overpowered fear. She told them about Aiko, not the billionaire, but the woman who looked her in the eye and said, "You matter." And then she said this. I didn't come here today to tell you how I made it. I came here to say I'm still making it, and so are you. A beat of silence. Then standing ovation. It wasn't about heroism. It wasn't about charity. It was about visibility. And that moment, with every light in the room reflecting off her skin and every woman on her feet, told Chloe something she never thought she'd believe. She didn't have to shrink anymore. She wasn't the story. She was the storyteller now. The Pinnacle Impact Prize was the kind of recognition that usually went to men in sharp suits who spoke in algorithms and market caps. It was prestigious, glossy, and always a photo op for the industry. Aiko never imagined she'd be the one accepting it. When the news broke, congratulations poured in emails, flowers, handshakes from people who once ignored her in boardrooms. But none of that meant as much as the handwritten card from a scholarship recipient of the Blue Phoenix Fund. It read, "Because of you, I finally believe my voice matters. Thank you for creating space where we never thought we belonged." Aiko folded the note and kept it in her purse. The ceremony was held in San Francisco's Civic Center. The grand ballroom glowed with chandeliers and polished oak. Rows of industry leaders, reporters, and tech influencers filled the seats. Chloe was there, sitting in the front row wearing a tailored navy jumpsuit, her hair braided to one side, her smile as steady as ever. Aiko walked to the podium with quiet grace. Her dress was simple black with a silk collar, and her voice, as always, was composed. "I've spent most of my career trying not to take up too much space," she began. "Trying to prove I belonged in rooms that were never designed with me in mind." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. But everything changed one night in Brooklyn. I was followed into an alley and surrounded by hate, but I was not alone. She looked down at Chloe. She was there, a waitress, a stranger, a woman who had no obligation to help me but did anyway. She stepped in with a courage I had forgotten existed. Aiko told them about the bottle, the stare down, the throw. "But this isn't a story about violence," she continued. "It's about recognition. That moment didn't just change my night. It changed my entire understanding of leadership." She spoke about how the Blue Phoenix Fund was born not from wealth, but from shared pain and belief. How Chloe didn't just save her, she awakened her. "I may be accepting this award," Aiko said, her voice thick with emotion, "but it belongs to both of us. One throw, 2 lives, and hopefully, many more changed because of it." The standing ovation wasn't polite, it was powerful. In that moment, Aiko Sakamoto wasn't just a CEO. She was a mirror reflecting what happens when one act of bravery becomes a beacon for millions. 2 weeks after the award ceremony, Chloe found herself back in Georgia. Same town, same porch, same creaky screen door that had never been fixed. Her grandmother, Pearl, stood at the edge of the yard in her Sunday dress, arms crossed, smiling like she hadn't aged a day. Chloe stepped out of the car, and before she could take 2 steps, she was wrapped in a hug that squeezed every last breath from her lungs. "Baby girl," Pearl whispered, "I saw you on the internet. You gone and made the whole world listen." Chloe laughed, teary-eyed. "Wasn't trying to be famous, Grandma. Just trying to do right." They sat for hours on the porch swing, talking like no time had passed. Pearl asked about Aiko, about the fund, about that bottle-throwing moment Chloe hadn't mentioned until now. "She's not just my boss," Chloe said. "She's my partner, my friend. She believed in me before I fully believed in myself." Pearl smiled softly. "Sounds like you finally learning to stand tall without shrinking." That night, Chloe went back to her old room. Same cracked mirror, same paint on the walls. But on the desk, next to a stack of unopened mail, was a letter handwritten, folded carefully. It was from a local high school girl, a young black artist who'd seen Chloe's speech at the summit and started painting again because of it. "I didn't know someone like me could stand on a stage like that," she wrote. Chloe held the letter to her chest. This was why it mattered. The next day, she visited the art center, where she used to volunteer, now barely funded, its walls bare, its programs shrinking. She talked to the director, asked questions, took notes. Before she left, she promised to send materials, mentorship resources, maybe even funding from the Blue Phoenix Initiative. "I don't want to just represent change," she told them. "I want to build it where it counts." A week later, back in Brooklyn, she and Aiko met at their usual cafe. Chloe pulled out a notebook filled with sketches and ideas for expansion, more cities, more grants, more hands-on work. Aiko smiled. "You sure you're not ready to run this whole thing yet?" Chloe laughed. "One step at a time." But in her eyes was the fire of someone who knew who she was, where she came from, and exactly where she was going. Sometimes, the world makes kindness feel small. We're taught that survival means staying quiet, staying tough, staying out of the way. That power is loud, that change is slow, that it's not our place. But then someone like Chloe McKinley walks into an alley, sees injustice happening in real time, and chooses not to look away. She doesn't ask for permission. She doesn't wait for backup. She just acts. And that act, as small as it seemed in the moment a bottle thrown, a line crossed, didn't just stop an attack. It started a movement, one that lifted voices, built bridges, and turned pain into possibility. Not because Chloe had all the answers, but because she had something most people overlook: clarity, courage, compassion. The truth is, the world didn't make room for Chloe. She carved it out herself. One risk at a time, one decision at a time. One moment of choosing kindness even when it wasn't safe, even when no one was watching. And what happened? Kindness met the right person. And it changed everything. Aiko, for all her brilliance, and had spent her life fighting to be seen not just as a tech leader or a woman of color, but as a whole human being. It wasn't money or prestige that brought her healing. It was being saved by someone the world dismissed. Someone who reminded her that leadership doesn't always wear a suit, that power isn't always loud, that sometimes the most world-changing people are the ones who've been ignored the longest. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a black story. This is real, raw, ongoing. Chloe didn't throw that bottle to be remembered, but the world remembered anyway. So what about you? What will you do the next time the world gives you a choice: stay silent or step in? Because maybe you are someone's turning point. Maybe your one act of courage becomes someone else's second chance. And maybe, just maybe, that small moment of kindness is the beginning of something bigger than you could imagine. If this story moved you, subscribe to Hidden Worth. We tell true stories that reveal the power hidden inside everyday people. People like you. Don't forget to like, share, and comment your favorite part of Chloe's journey. And remember, kindness isn't weakness, it's a decision. And it just might change someone's life.